turn off, and I don't see anyone with hats on, so I don't have to make that announcement. Clerk will call the roll.
Councilman Anderson. Here. Bucci. Here. Christensen.
Here.
Condon.
Here.
DePietro.
Here.
Fallon. Kinnon. Here. Murphy. Here. Nestor. Here. Spatafora. Lucy.
Here. First order of business. Okay.
Councilor Condon's motion to remove papers number 284, 285, and 286 from the table.
On Council Condon's motion to remove those table items from the agenda. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Item is removed. If we could have Mr. Jankowski from National Grid come up. For those that remember, a month or so ago, we had a council meeting. We've already had the public hearing on this work that Verizon is doing. At the time, we tabled that paper because of the item with double poles. Last week or 2 weeks ago, we had the people in for the double poles, and they satisfied what we were looking for, so we had taken this paper off the table tonight for Mr. Jankowski. Any questions from Mr. Jankowski? Did you read the papers? Yeah, why don't we just refresh our memory what the papers are about?
Paper 284, the petition of Mass Electric, DBA National Grid of North Andover to construct underground conduits, including necessary and sustaining fixtures at 730 Eastern Ave. Paper number 285, petition of National Grid for installation of approximately 465 feet of 6 5-inch conduit from manhole A666 to the Medford Town line, and the petition of National Grid for permission to install plus or minus 5 feet of conduit on Cross Street.
Okay. Any questions, Mr. Jankowski? Seeing no lights. On Councilor Condon's motion to grant, subject to the following conditions, that the street sidewalk be restored to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works, and that engineering be notified when the dig safe is called. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Paper's granted. Thank you, Mr. Jankowski. Okay, next we have a public hearing with Mr. Donnelly from the Assessor's Office. Mr. Donnelly?
We're back again for our classification hearing. The purpose being to set a residential factor for establishing a tax rate for fiscal year 2012. We will not be asking you to take the vote tonight. We'll be asking that this meeting be continued, but we did want to get the information out quickly. Our values have not yet been certified by the Department of Revenue. They are working on it, and we expect to hear from them shortly on that, at which time we'll be back looking for the vote. But in the meantime, I have handed out a packet to everyone. The front page on that is just a very brief recap on what happens with the residential factor, and typically we go to 175% on commercial, industrial, and personal property accounts in the city. That means that whatever their class is supposed to pay, it's increased by 75%, which results in a lower tax rate for the residential homeowners. If we continue as we have done in the past and went with 175% factor for commercial and industrial, it gives us a residential factor of 0.871839, which would result in a residential tax rate under this scenario of $14.33. If you were to give a break to the residential, I took it down to 1.6, the residential rate would go up to 14.75. As it's historically been done for at least the past 10 years, probably more, we have gone with the 1.75, which would give us a factor of the 0.871839, which is what we would recommend happens this year. It's the best deal that we can give to the residential taxpayers. I know that there's, you would ask for some information regarding the residential exemption, and I have included that. There are all different scenarios in the packet that I gave you. There is some time to look them over. I will say that in discussions with Mayor Howard, he is going to propose that the residential exemption remain at 20% for this year. He is the one that makes that proposal to me, and I bring it forward to you. And it is here for your approval. And we will, therefore we will be asking that you do that. In case there was any question of anybody as to exactly how that goes, I did put in a copy of the municipal finance law that governs that. It's Chapter 59, Section 5C. That's in everybody's packet. And that states that it is either the Board of Selectmen or the mayor make the option with the approval of the City Council. So that is there. There are then 6 scenarios in there, each begun with a colored copy. And the first one starts at the 20% and shows what the tax rates will be and what the break is to the different classes. About 2/3 of the way down on the sheet there, it shows the property class, the average value, what the tax would be if we did not adopt a residential factor at all. The next column is what the taxes would be with the residential exemption. Next is the amount of money that's saved by class. As you can see on the condos, the average condo is just under $200,000, and they would actually be saving $533.36. And right next to that is what happens if you own that same condo, but you don't qualify for the residential exemption. Instead of paying the $1938.95, the tax would be $2864.05. So there is a big difference between owner-occupied and non-owner occupied. And that scenario goes on for each step. We did it at 20%, 22%, 25%, 28%, and 30%, just so that you'll have an idea what going over the 20% would do. And the bottom column there compares fiscal 2012 against 2011, and what the assessments were and what the taxes would be, and the difference, the amount of increase or decrease for any particular class of property is on the right-hand side of that column. I know that we were unable to get this to you ahead of time. If you look at some of the stuff, you'll see it was just printed at 5:30 today. But you're not being asked actually to vote on this evening. If you would just peruse this material, and if you have any questions, please give me a call. If you have questions now, I'd be glad to try to answer them. But give me a call during the week, and we'll get you any information that you feel you need.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. We'll open up to questions from the council. I just will caution, we will be coming back to this at the latest next Tuesday. It could be sooner by special meeting, which, depending on when the DOR certifies our values, if they do within the next couple of days, we may be calling a special meeting on this just to not wait till next Tuesday. So we can open up to questions. I would just be careful on the scope of the questions because we will be back in a few days. I see one light. Council Kinnon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. Donnelly. If I were to look at the 30% rate as opposed to where we are today, on a single-family home, the savings would go up to 606.85, is that correct, on the 30% rate from 372?
That is what the savings would be as opposed to not having the residential exemption in the city.
Correct. So,
Yes.
so at the current rate, it's 372, is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
So the average single-family homeowner would put slightly over $200, $225 in their pocket.
Yes.
And the average two-family homeowner would put almost $200 in their pocket. Is that correct? 487.
487 to...
299.
299, yeah.
And the average owner-occupied three-family homeowner, which is not most of them, in fact, very few of them are owner-occupied today.
Yeah.
But the owner-occupied three-family owner would put away $135 or so. And the condominium owner, 300-something.
Yeah.
So the only ones penalized, and I understand there's a threshold where people don't get a benefit, right? But
Right.
the only ones penalized would be those running units above 9 units on average.
On average, correct.
And do we have many owner-occupied 9-plus unit? Or are they really mostly commercial businesses?
No, this only affects the residential. So it's only dealing with residential property. Commercial is not involved in this at all.
Well, yeah, I understand that, but it's properties that people live in.
Yes.
I mean, if I'm running Granada Highlands, I understand that that's residential, but it's a commercial entity in business, to make money.
Yeah. Actually, in the back of all of these examples, I have printed out, and it comes out to the same 99 people that are losing because of the residential exemption.
Are they losing, or are they just not benefiting?
There's a couple, there's probably 10 or so that aren't benefiting at all.
Yeah.
And losing a little bit. But there's a total of 99
Right.
properties.
And those are the very high-end properties in the city?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
positively.
Okay.
Yeah, but they are
And that's 99 out of how many total units?
99 out of 12,533, I think it is. Yeah, but they are listed in the back, and what I had done, I have them, they're in an order of value thing behind each of those, and it lists the address, the name of the owner, and the location. So, I mean, if you're interested to see exactly who is affected, they are. And right behind that, I also have the list of those that would create a problem for the treasurer's office because their total tax would go below 10%, their net tax would go below 10% of their gross tax, and that cannot be allowed to happen. So that's something, and there's only, I think, 13 communities in the Commonwealth that have the residential exemption, and I believe we're the only one that SoftWrite has as a client that has it, so I'm just a little leery on that. It starts at the 20%, there's only 9 of them, and those are all peripheral parcels. They're part in Malden, part in another community. So that's not a problem. If you get up to the 30%, though, you end up with a total of 80, but that includes those same 9. But there's 71 other properties, all condos, that fall below that level. So,
Yeah, so we'd have to keep them at a minimum threshold, correct?
right, that's correct.
So that's not a loss in revenue to the city when you do that? It's just,
No,
it's just we have to figure out how to do it.
Correct. There is going to have to be something, To my knowledge, SoftWrite does not have a community like that yet. I don't know if they have the software program in to take care of that yet. But that is, obviously, it is something that they can take care of. Other vendors have already, they've got programs written for it, so it's not that difficult for them to do. I'm just not positive it's been done yet. SoftWrite is, I believe, supposed to come in later this week to confer with the Treasurer's Office on some of this stuff.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, on the 9, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, and I don't mean to do that, but you may have, on the 9+ units, on those dwellings, do we know what the average value per unit, is that not per unit, but per property?
The average is, it's just $4,768,000.
Is the average value of that?
The average of all of the 9+ properties.
And so their taxes would go up to 71,000, is that correct? On the average? Yeah.
It's 68,000, 68,000 under that scenario, and it goes up to 74,200 on the 30% scenario.
Okay, and so the current rate for them is 68,000, is that correct?
Yes, 68 for you.
74, 60. So they would get an 8.8% average increase.
Yeah.
On their tax bill. And what is our rate per thousand, 14?
Right now,
Yeah.
fiscal 11 is 1358, and what we're looking at for fiscal 12, assuming the 20% scenario, we're talking 1433.
Okay. I'm all set. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Kinnon. Councilor Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. President. 4 requests. The first one, when you come back next week, I'd be curious what other cities and towns are in relation to these rates. If that's something you can pull together, just of the surrounding communities as to what their rate is, their tax rate is. That's number one. Okay.
You're talking about their proposed 2012 rate?
Yeah, I just want to get,
Okay.
I'd just be curious as to where we stand in relation to some of our other cities and towns,
Sure.
because, again, I subscribe wholly to what Mayor Howard said a couple years ago, that we have to start really distinguishing ourselves. So I'm just curious from a tax rate where we stand relative to Everett, Melrose, Medford, some of the cities and towns nearby.
No problem with that, Council. I will do that. I will point out that we have to compare it to what our rate would be if we did not have a residential exemption.
Okay.
Because that's considerably lower than what it is. But yes, I'll get that for you.
Fair enough. Okay. Question 2. Will you make it a point, although my third question might make it moot, to talk to Somerville, who I think you think is in closest relation to us, on them going to 30%?
Yes,
Maybe
actually, we could not catch up with them today. We do have a telephone conversation scheduled with him for Thursday at 3 o'clock.
Excellent, okay. And again, I'm just curious as to how they went about getting to the 30%. Question 3, and this might be more for the clerk to work on during the week. I'm somewhat confused by the process you attached in page 2 on how the residential tax factor becomes law, for lack of a better word. I thought over the past several years, we've always discussed and voted and sent it up to the executive branch, and then they signed off. But I think what you're saying tonight is that's not really the way it's supposed to go. It's supposed to come down from the executive branch?
Yeah, well, the problem with it, Counselor, is that we're doing two things. Now that we've got the residential exemption, we have to do two processes when we come here for the classification hearing. One is to get the residential factor,
Right.
which you propose and the mayor has to approve. The residential exemption percentage is proposed by the mayor, and you have to approve it.
Okay.
So typically, what happens is, before I come in here, I go up, talk to the mayor, come down, and, you know, what has happened over the past years is that I've come in and asked for what we had agreed on was the way we would go, which is, you know, I asked you, all of you, to allow us to start with the 5% because of the problems with that.
Okay.
And as I mentioned to you the other day, I'm still a little bit nervous. We're up to the point now where we've got 68% of the residential properties who are getting the residential exemption, which is very good. There's two communities that have higher.
Okay.
And they're like 70 and 71%.
Okay.
But we did pick up, this year, we've picked up 200 new people that qualify for it.
Okay.
And the only thing that scares me is when we go forward, when we start making this, I mean, right now, last year it was $887. This year, if you went to the 30%, it'd be over $1,500. And if people don't let us know ahead of time before we strike the rate, then we can't incorporate it into the tax rate. Right now, you know, every residential property is paying part of that.
Okay.
And then the ones that qualify get it back. But if they come in after we go to bill, then we've still got to give it to them.
Yeah.
But now it has to come out of the overlay account.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
And if there were 200 coming in at $1,500 apiece, you know, we're talking $3 million bucks. And
I understand that. I'm just curious if the city clerk by next week, just on how that, just for my own edification, I'd be curious as to really how the process works. My fourth question is, if not this year, you know, that we do indeed have to stand pat because it has to come from the mayor, which I'm still unsure about. I'd be curious as to maybe next week what, in a perfect world, your recommendation would be if, you know, we could just, you know, hear what your recommendation is next week. And then if we have to stay pat, which I think you're telling me now because the administration's indicated they like to stand pat because short window here in December before the end of the calendar year, maybe some ideas on going forward. I mean, would you think of a phased-in approach like we did previously, where we went 0 to 5 to 10 to 20? Would you do twos for the next 5? You know, just, I want you, if you would, I'd ask you to start thinking about that. You know, just as to what you would recommend to us in terms of, you know, getting to where I think we want to go, because the council spent a lot of time on this project, and I think we're interested in, you know, trying to figure out what is the best way to get to where we want to go. My final question is more to the president, and that is, you think next week we'll meet, and then there could be another meeting after that?
No, I'm hoping next week would be at the latest, we would okay this.
Okay.
If Department of Revenue certifies the values, say tomorrow,
Okay.
I would call a special meeting and probably do it by the end of the week, because I think it's that important. Every day means something.
Okay.
And, you know, if it goes to next Tuesday, it will. But I mean, if they certify the evaluations tomorrow, I will be calling a special meeting.
For this week?
For this week.
Okay,
correct.
thank you, Mr. President.
See, Council Condon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think it would be important if you explain to the council exactly what kind of effects it might have if we can't reach a vote on this residential factor and accept the exemption as put forth, and what that would do to our cash flow as far as getting our tax bills out when we're supposed to get them out, and how the DOR, what rules of theirs going to affect as far as putting out tax bills late?
Well, if we put out tax bills late, there's a myriad of effects, that none of which are good. It would, number one, affect our bond rating, our financial standing, and it would make bills unenforceable in January. If you don't have your actual tax bill in the mail by December 31st, then nobody has to pay a bill until May. So that would mean that the city would have to go out and borrow money for operating costs until May, and I mean, that's, it's a serious problem. The other thing, though, is if there is no agreement, I mean, the mayor has to propose an amount. If you vote no on that, if you, as a council, veto that, that means that there is no residential exemption.
So we lose.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it has to be agreed upon.
Lose the 20%.
Yes, if there's no agreement on a residential exemption, it has to be voted and approved every year. It has to be proposed by the mayor, passed by you. If that doesn't happen, and the mayor doesn't, send down something different for you to vote on, then you have nothing. There has to be an agreement. Has to be proposed by him, has to be approved by you. So,
So if I understand you right, there's a few things that has to happen here. Okay, the state has to, DOR has to certify our numbers.
Yep. And
I
had talked to the state. They feel that they will have the numbers by next Tuesday. They would not promise us anything for this week. So we're, walking on eggshells, but but it's hopefully supposed to be done by next Tuesday. And
they have to certify our numbers by next Tuesday.
Right.
We have to agree on what we're going to adopt for residential factor.
Right.
And these
then we
tax
have to-
bills have to get in the mail by December 31st.
Well, there's another step in there too, Counselor. After you people vote on all
Go
of
to
this
the printer.
and we agree, then I have to get the recap into the Department of Revenue. We do it electronically, but they need the paper backup with signatures and Chuck's backup for some of his numbers. That has to be delivered in there to them. They then have to go through that and approve our recap and approve the tax rates. Right now, they're just going to approve the values.